Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome home to Torah. I can't say welcome back to the Yiboneh Beit Midrash because we're no longer for just the last few weeks and maybe who knows how long, because we're here in the, what do I call it again? No, we're not in Hebron. We're in Yerushalayim. I don't want to say where we are. Anybody who's interested in joining us, send me an email and I'll send you the exact address. But we are in the war room, so to speak, where we're making tzitzis for our chayalim. And in a second, I'm going to show you a clip that describes what we're doing. Okay, I just wanted to show you what we're doing here. This is the command center. We are making tzitzis for the soldiers. The green ones are for the regular soldiers. The white ones are for the Chaya Levir, for the Navy and the Air Force. Okay, so I wanted to show you a quick glance of what the room looks like. Okay, you didn't do it yet? Okay. So this is what the room looks like. This is the command center, and they're being shipped out every day to the front lines. And now we're back. So now you have an idea why we changed locations to here, so we can make tzitzis for our chayalim. This is the spiritual armor. Now, I don't like to talk about politics, and I won't. I want to mention about mitzvah of learning Torah in order to really solidify our strength, right? Even the word chamushim, we went up chamushim from Egypt. Some translate and understand it as we went up armed. That's correct. Rashi actually says klei zayin, which means armed. But the Yakar explains, we went up already accepting the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, even though we didn't receive it, but we went up to receive it. So therefore, we went up armed. This is our armament. So learning Torah is so important. However, there's another aspect, and that is dan lechav zchut, to judge not only everyone favorably, but especially the Jewish people. God says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. He who curses you, I will curse. So keep that in mind when we think about the Jewish people, especially at this time. The other thing I want to mention, how important it is to learn about Akedah Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. Even the Christians believe in our Torah. Unfortunately, we have a large group of Yishmaelim who actually think that we corrupted the Torah, and it was Yishmael who went up on the binding, and it's a big problem, because the more we learn about it, and I tell you, it will help us understand how precarious the situation is. I spoke a lot about it last week, so those who missed it, go back to the last half hour of last week. But basically, who gave their lives? Who gave their lives for God, and who doesn't? So let's proceed. Since Torah is the most important thing, it says in Genesis 24:1, we are in Parshat Chaya. I want to mention that if you want to follow the original Hebrew sheets, there are links below that you could get to the website, our website, and choose which book and which parsha and which year. So it's important to try to learn Hebrew, and the beauty is in the Hebrew. That's first of all. Second of all, if anybody wants to receive the English sheets, they send me an email and I'll add them to the list. Okay, so in Genesis 24:1, that's what we're going to deal with. It says, Abraham was old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham with everything. Okay, the Abraham Zaken, Bo Biyamim. Now in Hebrew, Bo Biyamim, we're going to deal with at length. What does Bo Biyamim mean? The translation here in the Chabad is advanced in years. Art Scroll, I believe, says something very similar. He was well off in years. But the word bo means coming. Literally means coming. Coming in days. Coming in, we can use the word years, because that's what days implies. Maturity, old age. It says he was old and he was advanced in years. Okay, so that's what we're going to mainly deal with in the beginning. The problem the Yakar has is that already back in Genesis chapter 18:11, That's 6 chapters ago. How many years ago was that? That was 37 years ago. Okay, 37 years prior. Now, Avram and Sarah were old, coming in years. Sarah had ceased to have the way of the women. In other words, this is the scenario when the angels come and tell her she will have a baby, and of course she laughed, and we know the whole story. But the problem here is, how come the Torah has to repeat itself? If we learned 37 years ago, we learned 6 chapters ago that Abraham was old and advanced in years, even though it's plural, I get it. So it says, right, in Hebrew, Zakanim, right? Avraham v'Sarah Zakanim, Bo'im biyamim. We are going to learn a little bit of grammar here. Okay, let's go into the Yakar. He says right away, it's halfway down where it says chapter 24 on the first page. The Avram Zakain Bo biyamim. Avram was old and well into his old age. Harbe Meforshim Tamahu. Many of the commentators were aghast, were in wonderment here. Halo Kavar Namar. Didn't it already say, like I mentioned in chapter 18, verse 11, the Avraham Vasara Zekanim Bo'im B'yamim? It already said this. Why does the Torah need to repeat itself? And he explains, the Yakar, right away, that there is a time period between chapter 18 and 24. V'hoya kamo lamed zayin shana bein shnei zmani melu. There was approximately 37 years between these two time periods. Now, I get it. That Yitzhak was 40 years old when he married Rivka, so maybe you want to say it was 40 years. Remember, Sarah was 90 when she gave birth to Yitzhak, and she died at 127. And this is in Parshas Chaya Sarah, soon after she died. So it's appropriate to think there's 37 years between these two time periods. So there's a lot of time. So Abraham was already old and advanced in years 37 years ago. Why are we being told that now? So we do know in Bereshit Rabbah, famous medrash, that you know what Hashem did? He created a miracle, and he brought them both Sarah and Abraham, back to their youth. I mean, if you wanted to have a baby, so I understand, at least for the woman, she now has her menstrual cycle, but also Abraham is now full of energy and whatnot, and we'll discuss what that means exactly. And the Yakar says, V'tirut zeh maspik. This should be a good enough answer, but he's not satisfied with that. That could be a good enough answer. He says like this, Ach she'en lo semech min mikra. He's not happy because what is a medrash? A medrash is expounding on something that's in the verse, something that is alluded to and is drawn out from the verse. So the Yakar's initial reaction is, there's nothing that gives us this story that's within the Torah itself. So therefore it's not sufficient, even though that should have been sufficient answer. He says like this. Some say that the word ba'im is moira l'zman ha'hoiva. In chapter 18, where it talks about both Abraham and Sarah, that would be present tense, present perfect. Now, that statement can also, ba'im can also be past. It could be as well. But then, if that's true, it could be past, and maybe it should have said as in past tense. Ki haylo lomar ba'u. It would have been more appropriate for the Torah to use the past tense as ba'u, but it didn't. It used a present perfect. Therefore, the Yakar is concluding what's really happening is that in chapter 18, they are coming of age. They are maturing into a certain extent. Okay? There's a certain maturity process that's taking place, and therefore it would be present tense, right? As the present tense implies, that you're coming of age. But here in our verse, in chapter 24, the word ba implies past tense. Okay, so now it's also becoming a little bit more clear. And he says, Mashma shekavar ba b'yamim, which implies a past tense, v'zeh dikduk nachon. And this makes it a very good analysis, a correct analysis. So far, the Kli is somewhat happy that there is a reference to within the Torah. In other words, why does it have to say then? Because that was present tense. And now, in our chapter 24, it's past tense. Now he became fully matured, so to speak. However, the car has such an amazing insight that will blow everybody's mind. Pshat, even according to the simple explanation, Nochol Amar, you're actually able to say. Ready for this? This is in verses, number 5 on the source sheet, Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 9, and part of the verse, chapter 4, verse 12. It says, Toivim hashnayim min ha'echad, that two are better than one. We all know that two are better than one. Very nice. This is King Solomon, Ecclesiastes. Two are better than one, since they have good reward for their toil. And then in verse 12, and if a man prevails against one, and two will stand against him, then a three-stranded cord will not quickly be broken. In Hebrew, turn the page, it says, V'hachut hameshulash, right, a three-stranded thread, lo b'mehera yinatek, shall not quickly break. So two are better than one, and three are better than two. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to describe to you what the Yakar wants to say. Think about the state or status of Abraham. All he has is his wife before Yitzhak is born, and that's considered two. Yitzhak is now born, and now you have three, because you have Abraham, Sarah, and Yitzhak. Now we're in Parshas Chaya Sarah. Sarah dies, and now we're back to two. So two is better than one, three is better than two, and let's hear how the Yakar describes why we need to know this information. So after he says these two verses, he says, what does this mean? Ki ha'isha hatova. You know what a good wife is? Mayim, you know what a good wife is? She's mosefet labala chayim. She adds life to her husband. So the husband alone, okay, he's a guy. All of a sudden he gets married, and he's more than a guy. He's Superman, right? Because he has a wife, a good wife, and she adds the life force. And if you look in chapter 9, verse 9 of Koheles, which you will find on number 6, enjoy life with the wife whom you love. So in Hebrew, right? Re'eh chayim im ha'isha. Now, if that's true by a wife, she adds life to the man. What do you think a son does? The Yakar says, ben hatov, a son will add, he will moisif gam kain chayim la'aviv. The life force, the man is alive. He's really alive. Meaning additionally to what he has just from his wife. And then he says, it's an amazing concept, ki kol hama'amid ben tzaddik, anyone who raises a righteous child, ki ilu lo meis, it's as if he never dies. Now, I think we're talking about a legacy. We're not talking about absolutely physically never dying. We're talking about a legacy. Now, if that's true, in other words, it adds such a life force. So too, he says, Kal v'chomer b'chayav. How much more so in his own life while he's alive? Lefikach, and now he spells out what I mentioned. Min leidat Yitzchak ad mitat Sarah hayachut mishulash. So from the time that Yitzchak was born until Sarah dies, that is like a three-threaded. How do we say that before in the pasuk? Three-stranded cord, right? That is not easily broken. And then he says, "Ki nitos fa li Avram chiyus," that this added while he was in that 37 years, that there was a chiyus. A chiyus means a life force that was added to Avram from two aspects: mitzad ha'isha, from the aspect of his wife, u'mitzad beno Yitzchak, as well as from his son Yitzchak. Now just notice, everybody, it doesn't say anything about Yishmael. That we dealt with last week. Okay. Ubekol hayamim halalu, and during all these years, these 37 years, all these days, hayaoimed b'ma'amad ach echad. He was able to stand and remain in one level of status unchanged. Lo nitosvabo chusha kaminhag hazakenim, and he didn't become weak like normally. The older we get, the weaker we get. Right? No, he stayed in the same status of strength during those 37 years. Ki hayu lo yamei simcha ubracha. Avram was full of joy and blessing during those 37 years. Not to discount, he still had, right, the chiyus from his wife, and after his wife died, he still had Yitzhak. There was still a level, but there was a level for 37 years that remained unchanged and was quite a higher level than before or after those times. So the Yakar says, Avakodam leidat Yitzchak, prior to Yitzchak being born, lo haya lo simcha ki im ishto. He didn't really have joy except from his wife, which is not a bad thing. The achar mitat Sarah, now after Sarah died, lo haya lo simcha ki im bibno. So after Sarah died, the only simcha he received was from his son Yitzchak. Av kein hayu shnei gvulim elu shavim. So basically, gvulim are like borders. We're going to call them margins. These between these two margins or bookends, everything was equal. So very close to the birth of Yitzhak was very similar to what happened after Sarah died, meaning it was only a two heads are better than one, so to speak. Lefikach ne'amar lashon echad al shnei zmanim elu. Therefore, we see the same language that's used. Remember, the original question is, why did we need to hear both? 37 years ago in chapter 18, we heard that they both were old and coming in age, and now again, the same phrase is used about being old and advanced in years. Even though there was a lot of time between them, there's a story that needs to be told. Lefikach, haya mahader tekef lahasio isha. Now we understand why he wanted a wife for his son Yitzhak right then and there. Therefore, he was quick to chase after a wife for his son. Ki chashav, what was he thinking? Ulai ishto timale makoma shasara. Maybe if I get a good wife for my son, she'll fill the place that is missing because Sarah had passed away. V'yesamech bo, and we're talking about Avram would be happy through the wife of Yitzhak Mamish. And Chaya, and that's exactly what happened. We have a tradition that Rivka was born just moments before Sarah died. And I'll tell you the importance there in a second. Sha'ad shelo shaka shimsha shel Sarah, that just prior to the sun setting, S-U-N, setting of Sarah, meaning right before she passes away, Zarcha shimsha shel Rivka, that's when the son of Rivka shone or began to shine. V'naas dugmat Sarah mamash, and she became a splitting image of Sarah through her actions. Kamosha Perish Rashi Basamuk. Look at verse 67. Where do we find this? In number 9 on the source sheet. This is very interesting. So it's chapter 24, verse 67, and it says, Isaac brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother. Now in the Hebrew, it's a little bit, I'm not going to say it's different, but there's a certain nuance here. V'yavi'echa Yitzhak ha'ohela. So it says that Yitzhak brought her into her tent, and then it says Sarah Imo, Sarah his mother. So it's a little bit of a disconnect. But what does it mean, Sarah his mother? It's describing Rivka, that Rivka did the same action. She was a dugma. She was a perfect example of Sarah, as we will soon see in the Rashi.
Are you saying she was a Gilgal?
No, not at all. Look at Rashi. He brought her into the tent, and behold, she was Sarah, his mother. What does that mean? She became the likeness of Sarah, his mother. For as long as Sarah was alive, a candle burned from one Sabbath eve to the next. What does this kind of remind you of? This is like, the miracles in the base of Mikdash, but okay, their tent was like a Mikdash. So the candle burned from one Sabbath eve to the next. A blessing was found in the dough. There was always enough or much more. A cloud was attached to the tent. So when Sarah died, these things ceased. And when Rebecca arrived, they resumed. These miracles resumed. So, Michael, I don't know. I'm not that much into Gugulim. I don't know of anybody that says that Rivka was remember, she wasn't that she was, we said she was born right before, like moments before. If one would say that she was born moments right after, maybe there would be a reason to think that. You hear what I'm saying? It's
No,
my
I
own
understand.
reasoning.
But that's got to be Midrash. She was born before. She could have been born after. This is
Right,
Easter.
so the Midrash says that she was born because there was never without light. The
Okay.
light of the world came in right before
Got it.
she passed away.
It was a half
So there was
Midrash.
never a moment where there wasn't light. And it's very similar to the cloud of glory when we were in the desert. There's a similar phrase over there that we were never without protection in the desert. There is another part of this Rashi I want to read. It is the way of the world that, as long as a person's mother is alive, he is attached to her. But as soon as she dies, he finds comfort in his wife. Okay, we'll leave that aside. Anybody wants to tell, what do you call these jokes? Mother-in-law jokes. We'll leave that for another time. So now, the next part of this paragraph, just the Yakar says on this verse, V'yavi'echo ehala, right? When he brought her into the tent, Sarah, his mother, the Yakar is quoting from the Medrash, her Rashi, Hare hi imo, she is his mother. Now we're not getting into Freud, right? We're not going to go there. But for some reason, we already discussed what does that mean? That she was an example of everything that was connected with Sarah, she brought back. And that's why the Kliyakar ends by saying, Zo kishur nachon, this is a proper connection, besmichut pasuk zeh, regarding our verse, el hazivug shel Yitzhak, regarding the the union of Rivka and Yitzhak. Okay, now we'll continue. We're still stuck. I just want to give a little bit of a preface, an introduction, but I don't want anybody to get confused. Okay, and that's my goal, not to confuse you, right? So forget what we're about to read for a moment. When the sun rises, in English, we say the sun is coming. It's coming up. And when the sun sets, in English, we say the sun is going. Well, in Hebrew, it doesn't work like that. And in Gemara Brachot, when we're discussing the night of saying Kriya Shema at night, it mentions these words Bo Hashemish, and there's actually a discussion. Is that sunrise or it's sunset? Now the conclusion is that it's sunset. So the coming of the sun is actually sunset. The going out of the sun is actually sunrise. Okay? Now, putting that aside, we're now talking about the word Bo B'Yamim, coming of days. Why is that at the end of someone's life? Similar to sunset. So listen to this. Kilefi Hanira, even according to the Kliyakar, who's an expert in Hebrew, would say, you know what makes more sense? Yotza min hayamim. If you're on your way out, right? You're 90, 100, 120. You're on your way out. So use the word yotza min hayamim would be mi boile, make more sense. That's what the Torah should have said. But no. Ela lefi shahamida b'rashayim. We're going to find out. You want to be righteous? I want to be righteous. So we're going to find out the difference between righteous people and not righteous people. What is it about the Midah of Rishoyim, the people who are not righteous? Sheyamei hayaladot hein lehem yemei or v'yom bahir. I know this is counterintuitive, okay? But if it wasn't counterintuitive, it wouldn't be worth learning. It's got to be something counterintuitive. When these evil people are born, that's when they see the light and the brightness, because now they can, I'm going to use this word, eat, what's the word, drink, and be merry. Ki toivim hema lehem el hashimushim hagufanaim, because it's really good for them to get involved in using the physical aspects of this world. That is the ikar. The Kli Yakar says, Kizeh kol ikar tachlitam. That's their purpose. Eat, drink, and be merry. V'yameiz hazikna heim. You know what happens when they get old? Etzlam laila. It's like darkness. It's like night. V'lo yom. It's not day. Ki ha'olam chashuch b'adam. But the world is getting darker on their account. Yan ki lo yit'amu od min hadavash asher b'ktzei hamateh. Now, this is just a phrase that's quoted from 1 Samuel 14:43. It's just a phrase. I don't know what is behind the pasuk, but he's quoting the verse because he wants to get a certain point across. Because they didn't yet taste from the honey that's at the tip of their staff, meaning they want more. You have like this whole idea of, a carrot and a stick. So why would you give people a carrot when they deserve a stick? So, to encourage them to do something. So, or they have desires. So you want to trick them. Here, you're talking about the world, according to the Russia, according to evil person, is basically the carrot. The whole thing is the carrot. There's no discipline. Va'al kein hayamim rishonim toivim lehem meila. Therefore, their youth, their earlier days are much better than their later days. V'ki'ilu yotza miyamim el haleilos, because it's as if they're leaving their days towards night, because that's life for them. Life is young, liberal, irresponsible, okay, progressive, just like what we're seeing always in universities, the young people. Then they grow up and they become conservatives. Bezrat Hashem. Aval b'tzadikim, but when it comes to the righteous people that we all want to be, muchlefet hashita. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Shabai min haleilos el hayamim. They're leaving the darkness. They're exiting the darkness. They're coming in from the darkness to the days. Ki yemei hazikna toivim lehem. You know why the days towards their end are actually good? The days towards their being elderly are good because they're going el kniat chachma. They're approaching days where they can really acquire wisdom. Isn't that the tachlis? Isn't that the goal? To make the right decisions, to have the correct behaviors, the right actions. And when we're young, we're only starting out, we're only learning. And we think we know it all, right? Al derek shneimar, listen to what it says in Koheles. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 10. Don't say, how was it in the former days? How was it that the former days were better than these? For not out of wisdom have you asked concerning this. Beautiful. Al tomar, mahayasha hayamim harishonim, hayutovim eila, kilo mechachma she'elta alzeh. I just want to stop here for 1 second, because all of our generations are being judged according to who we are and what generations we are. We know that we have this concept called Yeridas Hadoros. The further we get away from Mount Sinai, the further we get away from Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Dovid, the lower we are, that's all true. But we're like dwarfs sitting on the shoulders of giants. God actually loves us more. This is a really strong statement. Reb Shimon Schwab said it. I heard this from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein just today. We make a bracha ahava rabbah, and we normally translate it as God's unbelievable amount of love, right? He's just got so much love, an unbountiful love. There's no limit to his love. But the word Rabbah, according to Reb Shimon Schwab, is increase. That as we go further and further away, the tests that we have are not the tests that they had. Maybe, whatever, we're more fragile, dainty. We wouldn't be able to handle the Crusades. We wouldn't have been able to handle the destruction of Beis Mikdash. Who knows? But the love for us is increased. Nevertheless, we should really have that in mind. Now let's continue. The last thing we said was that verse, and the Yakar ends this paragraph by saying, "Ki ha'omer kain." Anybody that says what Shlomo Melech said, don't say. Eino makpid al chachma. You can tell they're not at all concerned or interested in wisdom. L'chach nemar b'tzadikim. That's why it says by the righteous, bo b'yamim. They're coming in their days, leziknatam, towards, and I'm going to say old age, but really towards maturity, acquiring wisdom, and really the tachlis of what life is really about, the goal of what life is all about. Okay, let's continue. The Yeshomrim, L'chach Hiskir. Now we understand why it actually says Bo B'Yamim, coming in their days, by Abraham, Lahoros, to teach us what? Shalom Echamat Sar, Koftsa Olav Zikna. It wasn't like he saw a ghost and turned white, right? It wasn't like the pain of old age just jumped at him. Ki'im Mechamat Shabo B'Yamim. But rather, as we said earlier, like there's a process, there's a maturity, there's a responsibility that comes. And Shaharei Baruch Hashem B'Kol. That's why the verse ends. It says, God blessed him with everything. Lo hayalo shum tsar. It wasn't because of pain, right? It wasn't because you ever hear that expression? I thought I saw a girl. Like, why'd you turn white? But I'm talking about your hair. Like when you have a lot of stress, it can make someone age. But that's not what happened to Avraham. The Nochalamah were actually able to say, even by the next verse, which we're going to now deal with at length, by Elezar. Elezar is called Zakein Beso. Avraham is placing a tremendous amount of responsibility on him because he's the elder of the house. The elder of the house doesn't mean you're old. It means that you're responsible and you're mature and you can handle a lot of responsibility. And that's what the Yakar says. Shalakha kara es Elezar. Now we understand why Elezar is called Zakein Beito. Chaya Zakein mitzad shetzarchei habayis hayu mutalim alav. The only reason he's called the elder of the house because all the responsibility of the house was placed on him. Two more lines, and then we're going to change the subject. V'odia lana katuv. The Torah informs us. Shemitzad shahaya Avram Zakein. Lo haya b'kocho lelek levado. Now, since he was old, from the aspect that he was of age, he didn't have the power, the physical power, to go all the way to the north into Syria to find a wife for his son. He couldn't go alone. And he also didn't want to send Yitzhak. Games Yitzhak lo rotza lishloach. Now we can talk about the reasons. Obviously, God didn't want it to happen. But even from Avram's point of view, why Ki Yomar? Because Avram would say, Pen Yamut Pitom. If I send my son to look for his wife, what if I die suddenly? I'm kind of old here. Umiyasim Yado Alena. Who would put his hand on my eye, so to speak? As we see, there's a similar verse. Look at number 13. Even God says to Yaakov, I will go down to Egypt with you. I will also bring you up, of course, after you pass on to the next world, back to Israel to be buried. But he mentions, and Yosef will place his hands on your eyes. This is a very important thing. I mean, unfortunately, we're dealing with war. But even when not in war, when you're by someone's bedside and they pass on, the eyes should be closed. And I think we see that in the world today. At least, I mean, how many people are around when someone dies? But you've probably seen it in the movies. Okay. Now, I think this next piece is absolutely fascinating. It's very short. And it says like this. If you look at number 14 on the source sheet, and Avram said to his servant, okay, remember, he's talking to his servant, but he didn't say anything yet. He's going to say at the end, place your hand under my thigh. Okay, but we're not there yet. Who is his servant? His servant is Eliezer. And who is Eliezer? The elder of his house. This is the narrative. Avram said to his servant, the elder of his house, who ruled over all that was his. I want to focus on the word his. Who's his? It's Avram's, right? I mean, from reading the verse, Avram is the master. He has a servant. The servant is in charge of everything that belongs to Avram. So who is his? That would be, we'll call it Pashat Pshat. What if I told you his is Eliezer's? Would that change anything? Perhaps. Let's look at the Yakar. He says right away, Ki ra'oto, Avram saw him, Ne'eman, loyal, right? He saw that he was loyal. The Kol Beisohu, with all of his, Avraham's possessions. Perhaps that's how we read it. Al Kain Ha'amino, therefore Avram trusted him, Shalo Yikach Shochad, that he wouldn't take bribery, right? You can imagine. Look, if the father-in-law says, you marry my daughter, right? The potential father-in-law says to the son-in-law, you marry my daughter, I'll give you a dira, I'll give you an apartment, I'll get you a job in my company, right? It's called a bribe. Well, maybe not. But, there's all kinds of things that could influence a shidduch. V'yasi livno isha she'ena hagunalo. Abraham was confident that Eliezer would not take a bribe to marry off Yitzhak to a woman who is not fitting. Kilama yikach ma she'ena roilo. Because why else? If he's not going to take anything that's not fitting for him, Allahu Moshe b'kol asher lo. Because and he is in control of everything that belongs to him. I think we can make a switch now. If we're thinking it means Abraham, that fits. It also might fit that it belongs to everything that belongs to Eliezer, but we're going to make it clear according to the Yakar, as he says, "V'nocho lamer shamilat lo shav el Eliezer." Now I don't know if he proved this point before, but at least now he's going to. We can actually say that the word his is definitely going on Eliezer. Eliezer has absolute control over everything that belongs to him, Eliezer. How do we know this? Lefi shekol mi shehu lahut acher chemdas hamamon, because we know that anyone who's obsessed after, he's chasing after, right? He's got the desire for money. Hare mamono shalit alav. The money really controls that person. Okay, you can control your money or the money controls you. We'll see. And there is a verse in Proverbs 21:1. It says about a king's heart, Page mayim leiv melech bi'ad Hashem, al kol asher yechpot yitanu. So all that he desires, that's where his inclination is for. God actually allows you. He'll give you enough rope to hang yourself. He'll always lead you in the direction you want to go. I mean, unless you're tzaddik and you've davened and you it's not worth. God will protect you. God will protect people from self-harm. But we're not talking about that at this moment. We're talking about the general idea that God does lead you in the direction you want to go. Avahu eno shalit al mamono klal. So this person has desires for money, okay, but he doesn't have any control over the money. Now watch this. We're going to deal with two words. One is yitain, and natan. I want to compare two verses in Koheles chapter 6, verse 2. It says, a man whom God gives riches. Now, gives riches in Hebrew, I don't know if it gives riches, but it's yitain lo. Will give riches to. And property and honor. God gives him no power to eat of it. V'lo yashlitenu elukim lechol mimenu. And then I just want to take you just as a preview to Ecclesiastes 5:18. It's a very similarly worded verse. Also, every man whom God has given riches and property to. Now, this is past tense. And has given power to eat thereof. The person will consume his own stuff. And not only that, he will rejoice in everything. So let's look at the way the Yakar dissects these verses. Starts off with Ish asher yitain lo elokim oisher v'nechasim. The man who God will give. He's the one who's lo yashlitenu elokim lechol mimenu. God doesn't even allow him to eat from it. Doesn't allow him to enjoy it. Now the Yakar says, you know what? Hayal Olomar would have made more sense in chapter 6, verse 2, to say, Ish asher nasan lo elokim, the one whom God gave, but it says God who will give. So what is yitain? It means lahaba, it's future. The person doesn't have it. He doesn't have it and he wants it. He doesn't have it and he desires it. He's not satisfied with what he actually has. Lefisha hapasuk medaber, since the verse is actually speaking in chapter 6, verse 2, someone who is not satisfied with what he has. And we ask, who is a rich person? Someone who is satisfied with what he has. So this person feels empty. He wants more. Listen to what he says. V'hu mitzape tamid sheyitain lo Hashem od. He's constantly looking forward and anticipating for God to give him more. That's why it's future tense. Noisef al mashabiyado. He wants more than what he has in his own hand. Ki tamid ein lo dai, because whatever he has is not enough. Ze ha'ish. This is the person which asher lo yashlitenu elukim lechol mimenu. That's the one that God does not allow to benefit from all of his own property. Why? Ki eno ro'o bishalo, because he has greed, or he's not happy with whatever possessions he has. He's not in a state of gratitude and thankfulness for what he has, and he wants more. That's by the Russia. That's by the person like that. But if you look back at chapter 5, verse 18, that's where it's present tense and the person actually benefits and is allowed to benefit from what he has. Gam kol ha'adam asher nasan lo elokim. This is talking about the person who actually has. God already gave him riches and property. Hashlitenu lechol mimenu. God allows him to eat and enjoy. Ze matat elokim. This is a gift from God. So the very fact it says natan is a lashon of arts, past tense, because he ze hamistapek. He is actually satisfied with what he has. V'samech bechelko, he's happy with his lot. Hu ha'ish hashalita moishel b'kol ashelo, he is the person who's in control of all that belongs to him. Zelo yikach bevadai ma she'ena roilo, he would not take anything that doesn't belong to him, or it's not fitting for him. Umizeh hatzad ha'aminu le'Eliezer, and this is all from the aspect that what? That Avram trusted Eliezer. How did he trust him? Because he saw the way his attitude was for everything that he had. Not what Abraham had, but what Eliezer himself had. Abraham knew that this servant of his, Eliezer, was in absolute control of everything he had. The money did not control Eliezer. Therefore, the money did not incline him or force him to do anything on that account. Whatever was, the money did not cause him to do anything improper, but he was a straight shooter. And I think Zeperish Yakar, the Yakar explains this is a very dear explanation, even though in English it says, right, his. At first glance, there's no problem understanding that it would belong to Abraham, right? That Elezar was a trusted servant who took a great amount of responsibility with Avraham's possessions. You can read the verse that way, but it's an amazing insight from the Yakar how you can actually read other people. But the truth is, it's not just reading other people. How should we look at wealth? How should we look at money? How do we look at doing what is right and what is wrong in this world? And that's where I want to just end here by letting you know, look, someone asked me, if you don't have children, who are you supposed to teach? Because I mentioned the Jews are teachers. So I said, you find students. You find students. Right now, we're teaching the world a lesson, right? The world, the B'nai Noach, they're our students. And we are teaching them an important lesson. And we are extremely taking self-criticism, right? We understand what many of the problems are, but we are the people of the book. We are following the Torah, okay? Hopefully, right? There's enough pressure on the leaders that to follow the Torah in the situation. And if anybody is bothered, a Jew is bothered by the situation, please write me an email. Let's talk about it. If any non-Jew is bothered by what's going on, please send me an email and we'll talk about it. Okay? So B'ezrat Hashem, we are a light to the nations. What will come out of this will be absolutely positive for the world as long as we follow the Torah. B'ezrat Hashem, I wish everyone a peaceful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you next week.
It's